My husband set up a fake handsome delivery guy and caught me red-handed. I feel so stupid. My name is Miranda, female, 30 years. But my father used to call me Mimi, and my husband, or let me say my ex-husband, is Richard, male, 35 years. We met at home. I don't know if you will understand if I say it like that. Well, Richard had come to my house to deliver some documents that my father needed because he was working at home that day since my mother was not feeling well. He came to our house and asked where my father was. I didn't answer him at first because I had just zoned out the time I opened the door for him. I think he saw that I had zoned out and he just let himself in. That was when I managed to bring my mind back to reality. I was charmed by his handsomeness, his body posture, the way he dressed. One would swear he was a model or something, and not to mention when he opened his mouth. I just melted and zoned out on the spot. So I followed him and told him that my father was busy, but he could leave whatever he had brought to me, of which he refused, and told me that he needed to give them to my father. Luckily, father came down and took the documents that he had. Then he introduced us. I was 24 years old and he was 29, I think. Father saw the way I was looking at Richard and told me to stay away from him and should focus at school, not on boys. I first didn't understand why my father would say that, but with my stubborn self, I didn't listen. Instead, I would go to my father's practice and pretend like I was going to check on my father whenever I came from school, knowing very well that sometimes my father would work at home because he didn't want to leave my mother alone, and he didn't want any helper. Knowing very well that I was actually looking for Richard. He noticed that when I had come maybe for like 3 times at my father's practice, pretending to be looking for him while knowing that he was home taking care of my mother. He asked why I kept coming to the office while I knew that my father was working from home. I told him that I didn't know that he was at home. I thought he had come to work to operate someone maybe, because he would only go to work if there was a patient that needed his special operation and their condition was serious. I knew that he didn't believe my lie, but I didn't care because I wouldn't tell a guy that I had come to see them. So the guy just suggested that I should give him my contact numbers so he can tell me when my father would be available, so that I won't keep coming to the office for nothing. I didn't ask him many questions. I just gave him my numbers, and he gave me a call later that day saying he was just checking up on me. My heart was filled with so much joy when he called. Since then, he kept checking up on me either through calls or text messages. We became pretty close, well, privately, because we didn't want my father to find out that I was a friend of his personal assistant, since he had warned me to stay away from him. You know how us girls get when we are told to stay away from someone or trouble. We just don't listen and go to the trouble or someone we had been warned about, thinking that what your father told you was not true. We always want to prove our parents wrong by their speculations. But I guess mine was not wrong after all, and I regretted not listening to him. Anyway, a couple of months as Richard and I kept spending time together, we got closer and closer until I knew that I had developed feelings for the guy. I mean, he was treating me like a princess. He wouldn't go a day without checking up on me, taking me out every week and fetching me from school. Richard became my friend, my source of happiness. I was happy with him, I won't lie, and he would always manage to make my dull day gloomy without trying so hard. The more we spent time together, the more I saw him as a person who I wished to spend my life and have children with. He was funny, loving, caring, and very supportive, so you wouldn't fall for a person like that. He gave me so much attention. He once told me that he was born in Chicago and moved to Broadview Hills here in Ohio after his family was gunned down by some gangsters. His story was really heartbreaking, but despite everything I loved about him, he told me that he wasn't perfect, and I should expect that he might make mistakes along the way, but that won't mean he didn't love me. 6 or 7 months later, I don't remember well, he proposed. I had told my father that I was dating him and he didn't approve of our relationship, but he had no choice but to accept things as they were because a heart knows what it wants, right? And it wants Richard. We got married during summer holidays after my graduation at Hood School of Acting. My father was not really okay with me getting married at 25, but I made him understand that the decision I had taken was what my heart wanted. Things were great between us. Our marriage was what I can say a dream marriage life. He was perfect, we were perfect, you know. I didn't even get any doubt feeling about us. I had thought we were going to spend our whole lives together, but I guess life always has other plans for everyone, right? My mother had recovered, meaning my father had gone back to be hands-on with his practice. A year later after our marriage, we were still very much in love, and the love grew more and more, especially when we discovered that I was pregnant. We were so happy, you know. My heart still bleeds when I think of how much hope and faith I had put into that marriage, only for it to just end like it had never even started. It went down the drain like ashes being washed away by the sea. 9 months later, I gave birth to the most precious and beautiful twins. I was so happy and in so much love with them. That time I knew I had been blessed with everything in life. I had the most loving, supportive, and caring husband, and the most beautiful babies. What more would I have asked for? Sometimes being a housewife is somehow boring because you just don't do anything besides cleaning, washing, and cooking. I miss my life. Plus, my husband had suddenly become busy at work, so most of the time he wasn't home till late. The twins were a great distraction for me because I would have been lonely to death if they were not there. They brought so much joy and happiness in my heart to a point that I even didn't care much about Richard's sudden behavior. Just as long as they were there, my heart was at peace. About 2 or 3 years later, Richard started changing for the worst. He would go out a lot, saying he was going out with his friends and came back home very late. I knew his knockoff time since he was working for my father. Well, my father eventually accepted him as his son-in-law, and he allowed him to continue being his assistant because he trusted him, even though it wasn't fully, but he did trust him. The children would always complain that their daddy was no longer spending much time with them, and that would always break my heart because I didn't know what lie I would tell my children. I tried addressing that issue with Richard and begged him to at least show some love and attention to children because they were noticing that their father had changed. And to their little smart minds, they thought their daddy didn't love them anymore. Only if I knew that the bastard was actually on a mission to destroy my family and take away my rights. He promised to change and told me a lame and lousy excuse that my father was giving him so much work. So that was why he would come back late, because he didn't want any destruction and would leave the office before he gets done with everything. He became the father that my children wanted for a couple of weeks until he changed and went back to his old self. I didn't know what to do anymore, so I told my father what had been happening in my marriage. I had a glimpse of hope that my father would be able to get through him and become the husband to me and a father to our children, since Richard respected my father, as he said he was, or pretended to be respectful towards my father. I gave all my hope to my father, but the man didn't change everything that he was doing. He made them worse, from coming home very late and going out a lot with his friends. He became the person I didn't know and couldn't recognize. He was no longer coming back home, and came back home with a lousy excuse that he had slept at his friend's house. They had a lot to drink, so he ended up spending the night there. So as a qualified actress, I had learned about people's postures and body languages. I knew when a person was lying, and Richard was lying straight to my face. After some time, I saw that there was no change in his behavior. I took my children to my parents' house, not because I wanted to try and fix my marriage with Richard, but I wanted to find out about his behavior. My conscience was telling me that he was doing something that he knew I wouldn't approve of, or something that would jeopardize our marriage. Cheating was the first thing that came to my mind when he started going out a lot and not coming back home or even trying to spend some time with our children. Something was definitely offish with him, and I knew I needed to find out what it was. Sometimes hiring a private investigator for your husband can be too extreme because it questions your marriage, loyalty, and trust between two married people. So I decided to just stay in the house and observe him. It was easy because the Kinds were not there wanting my attention. Most of the time I would order in, not because I was too lazy to cook or anything, but because I got tired of cooking for someone who never notices my efforts and at least eats my food or takes it to work. It was really a waste of energy and food. I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was doing something that would definitely jeopardize our marriage. Things got too bad to a point that I was no different than single mothers. My husband was there, but he was not there. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. Everything was just too much for me to bear. The children were so handful and would sometimes ask for their father, and I had to lie for him every single day. You know the pain of having to lie to your children, telling them that their father was busy at work, even when you know deep down that he knocks off early and goes to wherever he spends most of his time with whoever he was spending time with. I loved my husband, but what he was doing to me was really what I never signed up for, and I needed to know what he was getting up to before I jumped into conclusions. I didn't even want to tell my parents about my marital problems until I knew what had been happening with the person I had married. One thing I will forever be grateful for that Richard had given me would be my children. On that one, he gave me the most precious and priceless gift ever. I don't regret loving him because till today I still have some feelings for him, but I regret being the one who approached him as a cheap and easy woman. He took that as an advantage and used me to get what he wanted. It took me a very long time to realize that I was actually being played, but guess who won at the end? So one day when I was chilling in my house going through the internet checking jobs that I can do while I'm staying at home, I decided to order some pizza to munch while searching for remote jobs. About an hour later, the delivery was at my doorstep, You know when you just take something that is delivered and not look who delivered it because you are bus glued on our phone. My consciousness was brought back to earth when the delivery guy greeted me and told me that I didn't pay on the app. I had even forgotten that I chose to pay on delivery. You know, when I lifted my eyes up, I saw this baby-faced-looking guy, and oh my God, he was so handsome. I didn't even know that there were such handsome delivery guys nowadays. The delivery guy asked for water, so I invited him inside. When I had to give him his water, something tripped me, and I almost fell. Luckily, the handsome, slim-fit delivery guy caught me on time. Mind you, that time I had only a body on, so the time I fell on him. It also untied itself, and boom, my underwear was revealed in front of a handsome and yummy stranger. We found ourselves lost in each other's eyes, you know. You know when they say there is love at first sight? Well, to me, it was lust at first sight. You know when you are way too close with a person to a point that your nasty mind tells you just either shoot your shot or kiss the guy. I don't know what was happening between me and the delivery guy, but the chemistry was there, you know. There was this attachment or connection that we had that I cannot even put a hand on it or even try to explain. You know when you have that long-lost lover and after years you find each other, and the love lost gets renewed again. That was how I felt with the delivery guy. I couldn't hold myself any longer. I ended up smashing my lips on his, and fortunately he accepted it. Everything just happened too fast because one minute we were kissing and the other we were making out on a couch. Slutty move, I know, but do you blame me? I couldn't resist it. So that was how our thing started. Sometimes we would meet at my house if my husband was not around, or meet at a guest house because hotels are not so private and anyone can see you walking in and out of it. The delivery guy introduced himself as Charlie Hirayama, male, 31 years. Yes, you guessed right, he was a half Indian and half Caucasian, meaning he was a mixed breed. Our thing started off as an unusual thing, or let me say an unusual moment of weakness. Then we found ourselves forming an affair in a most unexpected way. So one day, Charlie had invited me to have a chill out with him and his friends. I agreed to the invitation. I just couldn't stay with Richard that weekend, and his behavior was making me angry. I wanted him to change, but I think he didn't want to. He loved how he was. So Charlie and myself, after the chill out with his friends, we went to his flat, and we ended up spending the night together. With Charlie, I always felt free, like I was myself, and I also felt a sense of excitement and validation, but also guilt and shame because I went against Richard's disapproval. I knew that I had crossed a line and that there was no going back. I know it was wrong of me, but I couldn't help it. Richard was no longer doing it the way he was doing it before. It was like his ego and nonchalant behavior had somehow gotten into his head, and it was making him look like a crazy person or a person with bipolar disorder. He was very calm, but when he got angry, even the house would be on fire. So I would always try by all means to keep the peace between us. On the other hand, Charlie was making me feel completely happy, and he knew how to take responsibility for his actions. Richard knew how to apologize when he was wrong, and would make sure that he takes the blame as it is. I didn't know that in my relationship with Richard, the last time Richard had uttered the word, "I'm sorry." Instead of doing that, he would either deny or shift the blame on me or someone else. He didn't have the guts to say I'm sorry. Spending time with Charlie made me feel at ease. I felt a sense of belonging, and he understood me and my needs. I know I shouldn't have fallen for a person who was a delivery guy, but I couldn't help it. Charlie had once confessed his love for me before, but I was so much in love with Richard, so I kept rejecting him and told him that I didn't see him in that manner, but I saw him as a person who knows what I need and want, and fulfilling those gaps that I had in my life. Charlie became my best friend in a much unexpected way. We would talk about anything and everything, and I would even tell him about my shame of marriage. I was happy that he didn't judge me or give me advice to divorce my husband, but I guess the phrase that says marry your best friend was somehow true. Well, because I never really believed in such phrases. I only believed in my heart that if it loves someone, we can be in love with them or even marry them. The next day I tried to act normal around Richard, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something was wrong. Richard, being as nonchalant as ever, didn't seem to notice anything amiss, so my guilt and anxiety grew with each passing day. I didn't know what to do with myself, but I knew that I had to act normal. Eventually, I couldn't bear the weight of my secret any longer. I had to come clean to Jake. At least he deserved that, and see how he would react to the situation. So I confessed to Richard what I had done and told him that it was purely a mistake, and it wasn't my intention to betray him like I did. Richard was devastated. I know that he was a nonchalant person, but he had feelings, so I knew that I had hurt him with what I had done. I know that he had always been confident in our marriage relationship and never suspected that I would cheat on him. That was how much he trusted me, even with his behavior. He still gave me my place as his partner. As much as he looked devastated, but the answer he gave me was not what I was actually looking for. You know when you decide to come clean to your partner just because you feel guilty and remorseful of what you have done? You expect your partner to act ballistic and maybe explode like a bomb. I had expected him to be angry at me, shout at me, or even break things if he had to, but the bastard just gave me an okay. That frustrated and infuriated me because it wasn't the reaction I'd been expecting and hoping for. I asked myself the whole day if Richard still loved me, and why would he give me a simple and dry okay after I had confessed my sins to him. Since then, Richard moved out of our house without any explanation or proper talk, which I think was a bit too much and childish. He shouldn't have moved out, you know. I was heartbroken and filled with regret. I realized that cheating on Richard had been a huge mistake. I had expected so much from Richard, but he had shown me that he still had the mind of a child. I won't lie and say I didn't miss him because I did, and I had tried calling him to come back home. I had even gone to my parents' house to fetch the kids, thinking that he would at least come back to his senses and come back home. It took him more than 6 months for Richard to move back in. I had got back with Charlie because I was way too lonely, and I needed some vitamin D in my life. Charlie was there when I was in my lowest low. He, Charlie, gave me everything that I had wanted and fulfilled my desires. One day I had ordered pizza, and to my luck or unlucky, the pizza was delivered by Charlie. You know how kids like to see who comes in the house and check whatever thing that you do. So that day Charlie came in not minding the company that we had. So he kissed me and one twin spoke, which was when he realized that I had my kids over. The room became too small for all of us, and I knew that my babies had loud mouths, so I was sure that they would tell their daddy what had happened. Charlie had to bribe them with money so that they would not snitch. I knew that I had to make introductions of which I didn't know what I would call Charlie, but I ended up settling to call him a friend, of which Charlie was not exactly happy about it. But I couldn't care less, and I had to save myself from my kids and their loose mouth. So one day as I was coming back from the shops, I received a call from my mother telling me that my father had got involved in a car accident when he just left his workplace going home. At that time, Richard had come back being the best husband and father to me and our children. As much as he was trying, I was happy, but I couldn't trust him anymore. You know, staying in one house and sharing one bed with someone you do not trust is a very dangerous and poisonous pill to take. As I was going through the phase of being stressed about my father, Richard had taken over from my father since he was his assistant, meaning he knew a lot around the company and my father's duties. I ended up finding solace in Charlie. We were meeting in our secret location, a guest house not far from my house. Charlie was actually a very good distraction at that time. He was what I needed. So after our lovemaking session, well, a lot of lovemaking sessions, we decided to order in because we had planned to spend the night at the guest house. As we were still waiting for the pizza that we had ordered, Charlie saw that it was taking its own sweet time to be delivered, so he suggested we go to the pizza restaurant and take the order himself, because he was on duty when he came to the guest house. As I have said before, Charlie knew me. He knew my happy and joyful mood, and he knew when I was not in a right state of mind or going through something or sad. When I called him, he was the one who suggested that we go to the guest house. Later on, there was a knock at the door. In my mind, I had thought that maybe it was the first delivery guy. That time, Charlie was back with our food, and another thing, we had forgotten to cancel the other order because we were so caught up in our bubble. So I went to get the door while Charlie was in a small kitchenette dishing out food. Mind you, we were on our underwear. Well, I had my lingerie on while Charlie was in his briefs. When I opened the door, I saw this handsome guy. He told me that he was there to deliver my order and even apologized for the delay. I took the box of pizza, and as I was about to close the door, the man asked for water, saying that he had lost direction to the guest house, so it took all of his energy. With my kind gesture, I asked the guy to come in so I could give him the water that he had asked for. I went to the kitchen and poured him cold water, but when I turned to give him his water, I got the shock of my life. You know when you get a shock that is very extreme to a point that you even feel your heart stop beating for a moment. Mouth goes dry, my palms and forehead sweat like I was running a marathon. Even the breathing pace changed. It was like I was running a 50 kilometers race in an hour. Charlie had gone back to the room that we were in, so he came back to fetch me, saying that my food was getting cold. He found me in the statue position, not moving or anything. I was just lost for words and didn't know how I should feel. Charlie greeted the man, then asked why I looked like I had seen a ghost. You know when your mouth is dry and no voice is coming out. I wanted to tell him that the person in front of us was my husband, but I couldn't tell him because I had somehow lost the sense of speaking. Richard asked why I was so spooked, as if I had never seen my husband before. That had Charlie's attention, and confusion was written all over his face. Yes, Charlie knew that I was married, but he didn't know what my husband looked like. When I finally gained myself a bit of strength, I asked Richard why he was there and where the kids were. He told me that the kids were at my parents' house with my mother, of course, since my father was in hospital. I tried to reason with him, but he didn't want to hear anything that came out of my mouth. He bluntly told me that he just wanted to know why I had been acting fishy lately and why I had been absent to our children. He then told me that the twins had told him about a man that came to our house and kissed me. You know when you have been caught red-handed, and there is no way to deny or hide because the truth is out there. I felt so stupid to even think that Richard wouldn't find out about my abomination because my husband, or must I say my ex-husband, was a very calculative man, and he was analytic. He was the kind of man that would just look at you doing your own thing and act like he wasn't there and he didn't see anything while he knew everything. I tried to apologize to my husband and beg him to forgive me, while on the other hand, Charlie wanted me to explain to him who my husband was. I didn't know that I should have explained anything to Charlie because he knew that I was married. So instead of answering Charlie's question, I asked him to go, but instead Richard announced that he was the one who was going and we should continue with what we were doing. He even apologized for disturbing us, as you can imagine, and told me that I would find him home. I couldn't believe that my own husband, who claimed to love me in front of our families, friends, the priest, and even God himself, would actually do that to me like that. Why would he set up a fake handsome delivery guy just to prove a point? I just didn't understand him. What he did was somehow creepy and nasty. I couldn't even continue with the plans that we had with Charlie for the night. I just ran after Richard only to find him gone. So I had to take my car and follow him home. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I was prepared for anything that would happen because, I was the one at fault, and I deserved every punishment that I could get. A few days later, the doctor called me and told me that my father wanted to speak to me. I didn't know why he wanted to speak to me, instead of fighting and going back home to Mom, but I went to his ward. He told me that he knew about everything that was happening in my house, and Richard had been acting fishy at work before his accident, so he decided to do an investigation on him because he acted suspicious. So during his own research, he found out that Richard actually had a fiancée back in Chicago, whom he left her pregnant and came here to make money, or to scam more people so he can go back to his hometown and take his fiancée and relocate to another state. So Richard found out about what my father had discovered, so he tempered with my father's car tires because my father wanted to take the evidence he had found and take it to the OPD, Ohio Police Department. That was when my father got into that accident. My father then said to me, "Please make sure that you take good care of my assets, my practice, and everything, because your greedy and manipulative husband had tried to trick me to sign off everything, including my house, to him." Luckily, I had already called my lawyer to change everything and asked for a fake form similar to the one that Richard wanted to trick him with, and signed it. I just couldn't believe my ears. How could one person be so heartless and manipulative? Meaning that Richard thought he had won, but he didn't do his research, and he was the dumbest person I had ever come across, though I still had some love for him. My father had always been warning me, but I was too blinded by love to a point that I didn't even see when I was putting myself in danger. And the worst part was that Richard even gave me kids while he knew that he was in my life for a mission. I felt so dumb and stupid, and to even think that I actually still love him makes me look like a beggar for unreal love. I had developed some love and hate for my husband. I was no longer comfortable and free around him. Is that even normal? After a couple of days, my father passed on, and it was the hardest moment of my life. After my father's funeral and the reading of his will, Richard actually came to me and asked to speak to me. You know when you look at the person you despise and you would feel like puking? That was how I felt for Richard. I didn't know why he was not filing for divorce already. So he told me that the house my father had left for me, or thought he had left for me, was his. My eyes widened in disbelief, and a moment of silence hung in the air. Then, unexpectedly, I burst into laughter. I just couldn't help it, because I had thought he was going to change his statement and say he was joking, but he wasn't. I didn't know that my husband would stoop so low and want to take over someone else's house. It was just hilarious. Richard looked at me, perplexed by my reaction. He got confused by my sudden outburst laugh, which made him look like a fool, and got angry. He unleashed his true colors, the rage that was visible in his eyes. I saw a different side of him, and it was somehow scary because I didn't know what he would do either to me or the kids or even my mother, since he became so obsessed in taking my inherited house. He became a whole different person, and I really thought of the worst, but instead he just went away to only God knew where he went to. A week later, reality started kicking in. I missed and needed my father and his advice, but the bastard that I had married decided to act God in my father's life. The house was in so much peace without him in the house, even though the kids asked about him, but I would tell them that he had gone to a business trip. 2 weeks later, I had filed for a divorce and for a restraining order because Richard kept calling me and coming to my family home acting all psycho, to a point that even the kids got scared of him. I also handed over the evidence that my father had discovered during his investigation. Luckily, the investigation regarding my father's accident was still ongoing, so it was easy to bring Richard down. My mother found me a therapist that did house calls, and I was grateful for that because I didn't want to face the world, I was going through a very rough patch. I was not coping at all. I was somehow scared that Richard would see me or temper with my car tires also like he did to my father. I couldn't leave my kids alone. Richard was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder, and another 25 years for scamming a businessman in Chicago, and other charges came up when the police continued with the investigation. I was so relieved that he was finally away from me and my family, and I had vowed to never ever think I know better. Please tell me if what decisions I had made were good moves. I mean, half of my heart still loves the guy, but the other hates him with passion. My children sometimes want to visit him in prison, but I do not allow them because I do not want anything to do with Richard. What should I do? Please tip me here because I am lost and I don't know what to do.